Some folks might say that having a child at 50 is really challenging, but I can tell you it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. One of my favorite things is to sit with my daughter and watch the Disney Channel, watching those shows about princesses, about dreams, and about them overcoming obstacles to achieve those dreams. To me, that really resonates, because from a young age, I've said that dreams are promises that we make to ourselves. If you dream it, and you promise it to yourself that you're going to work hard to try to achieve that dream, almost anything can happen. Two paradigms that I've lived by for my career in business and law enforcement is to create your own opportunities and overcome obstacles. Create your own opportunities throughout your life. You're going to have times when somebody opens a door for you and gives you an opportunity. But more often than not, if you can see the opportunity and create one, you're going to be very successful. Also, I believe in hard work and perseverance. And when you have obstacles that appear in your life, to work hard to overcome those obstacles. And I'm going to try to share with you today both some opportunities I've had a chance to create and obstacles that I've overcome to have a successful business career and a successful 30-year career in law enforcement, protecting and serving those communities across the country. I talked a little bit earlier about creating opportunities, and I just want to share with you a couple of opportunities that I created. And the great thing about those opportunities is you never know what they're going to lead to. You never know what's around the next corner. When I was 15 years old, I walked into a television station and I was intrigued about television. And I told him, I said, I'd like to work here and learn about television. Well, the secretary told me that they weren't hiring. And I said, I didn't want a job. I wanted to learn. She was so stunned by that coming from a 15-year-old, she went and grabbed the general manager and he came out and spoke with me. And I told him, I want to learn about television. I don't know why, but I'm intrigued about it. He was amazed and said, yeah, that would be fantastic. And before I knew it, I was back in the news studio. I was working with the anchors. I was in the production booth, and I spent a couple years learning about television. Well, at that time, I had never dreamed that 30 years later, I would be a law enforcement analyst for both CNN and for Fox News, making regular national television appearances and appearing on shows like Good Morning America and The Today Show, and working with international audiences on networks such as BBC and the Canadian Broadcasting Company. So the opportunity to walk in and say, I wanted to learn something, I was intrigued about this industry, paid off years and years later. When I first started the Walking Beat in Oak Cliff, Texas, I met with the publisher of the Oak Cliff Tribune. And I told him, I said, I'd like to really get the word out on policing and law enforcement to the entire community, and I'd like to write a column. He said, have you ever written a newspaper column before? And I said, no, but I've got a certain perspective. My perspective turned into Police Perspective, a weekly newspaper column that was one of the most popular columns in the newspaper and appeared for almost a decade. That column turned into a book, Police Perspective, Life on the Beat. And that newspaper column gave me the ability to launch my publishing career and led to my book, The Eyeball Killer, the story of our capture of Dallas's only serial killer, which occurred right there on my beat in Oak Cliff. One of the most rewarding things of working with law enforcement agencies across the country is meeting and working with the citizens, the people that they serve, to learn their needs. And I can tell you, working a downtown district, one of the first things that I did is I saw that the downtown district was in disrepair. It looked old and didn't look inviting. Paint was peeling, awnings were ripped, and there was literally trash on the street and on the sidewalks. One of the first things that I did as a street officer in full uniform was to go up to a hardware store and get some brooms. When the owner asked me why I was buying the brooms, I told him I wanted to pass them out to the different shop owners, that I wanted them to sweep in front of their storefronts every single morning to help make the neighborhood look a little bit better. He was so intrigued by the idea, he gave me about 20 brooms and said, pass them up all up and down the street. And as I brought a broom to each of the store owners, I said, listen, at 8 o'clock each morning when I start my shift, you're going to see me in front of my office and you're going to see me sweeping the street. I knew that I was planting seeds to not just sweeping the street, but painting the facades of buildings, revitalizing the community, and showing the criminals that we cared about the community. It's just like putting an alarm sign up in your front yard. You're telling the criminal, I care about my house. I care about it protecting my family. We have an alarm system. We have a lighting system. We don't want you here. That criminal is going to move on to the next house. By sweeping the streets, by cleaning the storefront facades, we were letting the criminal element know you are no longer welcome here. This is our community, our street, our neighborhood. Go find somewhere else to commit your crimes. Not everything in police work is so dramatic. As a matter of fact, the very first commendation that I received was an absolute disaster. As a rookie coming out of the academy, you spend time with your FTO and they try to teach you everything you need to know to survive on the street. But sometimes it doesn't work out. Right after I got off of training, I was given a robbery in progress call. One of the most high-level calls that you can get. One where you go lights and siren and try to get there as quickly as possible. Except this call came at a time when most officers were off the street. It was in the middle of shift change. And I had to get to that robbery, and I had no idea where I was going. Long before iPhones and long before navigation systems, we had books where we had to look up the maps and try to figure out how to get there. So as a young rookie, I'm looking through my book. I'm trying to figure out, how do I get to this robbery? I call my partner who had said was going to back me up on the call, and he said, I'm a long way away. I can't get there anytime soon. You're on your own. So now I'm a rookie cop, fresh out on the street. I don't know where I'm going, and I've got an armed robbery I got to get to. So I turn on the lights and siren, and I head down the street in the general direction, and I get to a series of one-ways, and this liquor store is in the middle of this series of one-way streets. And I just totally lock up, and I can't remember. I know I'm a cop. I know I'm in a police car. I know I'm in uniform. Can I go the wrong way on the one-way street? Well, the only thing you're more scared of than the robber is your supervisor. So I didn't want to get in trouble. So I went around the back of the liquor store the long way. Well, I got so turned around, I ended up in an alley. So doing the only thing I could think of at the time, having a whole year on the department or less, I stopped my car, got out, and said, I'm going to run to the liquor store. So I bail out of my squad car, I start down the alley, I turn the corner, and right when I turn the corner, bam! I go flying in the air. Another guy goes flying in the air. The other guy had a gun. The other guy had money. The other guy was the robber. The crash knocked both of us senseless. But I had enough wits about me that I crawled to my knees just in time for my backup to come around the corner and see me leaning over the bad guy. He said, great arrest. I can't believe you captured him like that. I said, boy, I really got him. And he said, by the way, where's your squad car? I said, well, that's another story. Most of the time, police work is boring and repetitive. We go out there, we work traffic, we write our tickets and arrest offenders, but it's not a whole lot of action. Certainly not what you see on network TV, where you have shootouts and car chases and they solve crimes in 46 minutes of an hour television show. Many times you're simply out there driving the streets, trying to keep people safe, trying to help them not to speed. Well, one day I was trying to get home and I was making my last cruise through the neighborhood. I was going to go play baseball with my boys as soon as my shift ended. But someone cut in front of me and I thought, okay, well, I'll pull him over and give him a warning and let him go, and I can still get off on time and go play baseball with my sons. Well, that's not the way the deck was stacked for me that day. And as soon as I turned on my red lights, the car took off and the chase was on. I wasn't going home anytime soon. And I chased him through the neighborhood, and I chased him across major streets and over big thoroughfares, and there were several cars now in the chase. And as we went over and got towards the Dallas Zoo, he decided to bail out of his car. So he stopped the car and jumped out, and I stopped my car and I jumped out, and he ran into a tunnel. And I had no idea where that tunnel went, but I chased him into the tunnel. Luckily, I had a flashlight on me because this was the middle of the day and I wasn't prepared for a tunnel. And I was yelling, please, please, stop. And he kept running, and I could hear his footsteps sloshing in the water as he ran into the tunnel. And I just kept going after him, and the tunnel kept getting smaller and smaller. A tunnel that I crouched in to get in the beginning, all of a sudden I was almost on my knees when I hear him say, "I've got a gun." Oh my gosh, talk about your life flashing before your eyes. Here you're in a tunnel, a steel tunnel, feet away from a bad guy who just stole a car, bailed out, and he tells you he's got a gun. I said, "You don't want to use it. In this tunnel, both of us are going to die. That bullet is going to hit me, and I'm going to return fire, and I'm not going to stop until I'm out of bullets, and we have nowhere to go. And unless you want us both to die right here today in this tunnel, don't pull that trigger." Well, I heard the gun drop on the metal floor and fall through the water. And he said, "I dropped my gun." And I said, "And I'm putting mine away." And we started to talk, and I said, "You know, you got to come out." And he said, "I'm stuck." I said, "I'll get you out, but you got to come out, and you got to come out peacefully." Well, I tried calling for backup, but my backup was just now making its way into the tunnel. And when he got there, he said, "We didn't hear anything." I said, "The radio doesn't work in this tunnel." I said, "But he's stuck, and we need to get out of there." So my backup said, "We'll try to figure a way out." So for the next 20, 30 minutes, I don't even know how long it was, I talked to this individual. And we talked, I told him I was going home to play baseball with my sons, and he said he collected baseball cards. And we talked about all kinds of things, and I convinced him that he did not want to die in that tunnel that day, and neither did I. Well, after what seemed like an eternity, when he finally got calmed down, we see a light from above us at the top of the tunnel. And we hear someone shout down to us, says, "We can get you out. We can pull you out of the tunnel through this basically manhole." And I said, "Great, but where are we?" And they said, "You're under the Dallas Zoo. You're in the lion's cage. We had to move the lions." I went, "You're kidding me." Just when you think your day can't get worse. So they bring several people in, they lower some folks down, they grab the suspect, and he gets out of the tunnel first. Then they come down and they say, "Okay, we can get you out too, so you don't have to walk the quarter mile back through the tunnel." I should have walked the quarter mile back through the tunnel, got in my squad car, and went home. But he was my suspect. He was going to jail, and he was my arrest. So I said, "Okay, lift me up." And as they lifted me out of the tunnel into the lion's cage, I could see the suspect already handcuffed, a crowd of officers around, and all of them roaring like lions as I came up out of the tunnel. For the next 6 months, anytime I walked down the street and saw another officer, I heard this roar. You heard me talk a little bit earlier about me getting a broom out and in full uniform going out in front of my storefront office in the downtown district and sweeping the sidewalk. I took that story on the road and worked with communities all across the country. I was in New Orleans one time teaching a class, and I spoke with some officers and told them the story about cleaning the sidewalk in front of my office and really becoming engaged in the community. One of the great things that I love about working with communities and traveling across the country and around the world is you never know where people are going to take those stories. A couple years later, I met with a young officer that said, "Hey, I took your clean the street story and took it to a new level." I asked him, "What did you do?" He said, "I was assigned to an inner city project, a project that was rife with drug dealers and with prostitutes." And he said, "I went to my local store and asked them for a folding chair. Just like you years earlier, they said, 'Why?' And I said, 'I wanted to put folding chairs out in the courtyard. And every day when my shift ended, I was going to sit out there in uniform.' They thought I was crazy and making myself a target, but I knew better because I knew people in that community." He took that folding chair and he put it right in the middle of the courtyard, literally on dirt, as the courtyard had no grass. And people would ask him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm going to sit out here because just me sitting out here is going to let some of the drug dealers know you're not welcome here anymore." Well, the first few days he was very alone sitting in that courtyard in that chair. But after a couple of days, some of the older people that lived in that apartment complex said, you know what? You're exactly right. We don't want crime in our neighborhood. We want a safe and secure neighborhood. And they got folding chairs and they sat with them. Well, from sitting out there in that bare bones courtyard of that beaten up apartment complex, they started talking and saying, why don't we have any grass? There's nowhere for the children to play. There's no playground equipment. And just by talking through some of the issues in their community, he said, let me make some phone calls. And he found a landscape company that volunteered to come in and put sod in. He found another company that volunteered to donate old playground equipment. And within a short time, a number of weeks, what do you think happened? That courtyard was filled with people, with moms and dads, with children, talking, visiting, and playing. One of the most unique jobs I've had over the last couple of decades is working for one administration where we went out and did an assessment of the law enforcement activities at Yellowstone Park. And part of that assessment was going out to a remote island in the middle of the lake called Pine Island. And it was extremely interesting because as we went out there to meet the park rangers and take our little exposition out to the island, the rangers said, well, take all your gear out and put it here on the shore. And we said, well, we thought we were going over to Pine Island and working there for the weekend. And they said, you are. But the only way to get there is by canoe. We don't allow any motorized vehicles. We try to keep it as pristine as possible. So, loading all of my gear into a canoe and summoning all of my paddling skills, which are about that much, I got in there and paddled my way to Pine Island. Well, it was everything I could imagine. Pine Island has a structure that was built by Ted Turner many years ago, and where presidents and their families go to vacation to get away from the hectic life in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Bush had been there the week before me with some of her girlfriends, enjoying the scenery and taking pictures of the flowers. We got to Pine Island and it was absolutely amazing. We worked with the rangers. We got to fish magnificent trout, the best trout I've ever seen in my life. We got to spend time out in the island and enjoy that in the context of how the rangers work, how they save lives, how they make rescues, and it was absolutely fantastic until they had to rescue us. Because in the middle of the morning, on the last day that we were there, the rangers came in and said, we need to leave. We said, well, we thought we weren't leaving until the evening. And they say, we need to leave right now. There's a storm coming in, and if we get hit, we're going to be out here, maybe stranded for several days, and we only have enough food for today. So once again, we threw all of our gear into the canoe and got out onto the water just when the storm hit. So for a novice canoer, it was quite difficult paddling into a 60-mile-an-hour wind, rain coming down, trying to find the mainland, get back there and unload all of our gear for our trip out of the park. But I can tell you, I saw moose, I saw bears, I saw bison all over the park, but nothing was as exhilarating as trying to survive a canoe trip in a major storm that was hitting Pine Island, where the rangers told me, quick, put on your life jacket. And I said, I'm okay. They said, no, the life jacket's not for you, it's for your family. If you fall in the water, you're going to die in about 7 minutes, but if you're wearing the life jacket, we can find your body. I tell you, I've done some crazy things in law enforcement, but my trip to Pine Island was one of the craziest. After working in the inner city for so many years and seeing the trials and tribulations of so many people, I've built a little piece of property that has a stocked bass pond, so I can go sit out there and fish, and it's catch and release only, but it's a nice, relaxing activity. I've got paper shell pecans that each year my wife and I harvest, and we have these beautiful golden pecans that we give away as presents each Christmas so that people can cook with them and bake and make pecan pies. And we've started a vineyard in the front yard, a small vineyard, but one that is going to have high quality wine. And I believe in being passionate about everything I do. And as the father of 6 kids, there's a couple of lessons that I've tried to impart on all of my children. To create their own opportunities for success, not just now, but down the road. To persevere and overcome all of those obstacles that life has to throw at you. To be responsive to people's needs and people's concerns. to work hard and do the best you can at all times, and to remember that dreams are promises that we make to ourselves. All right, thank you. That kind of concludes my spiel for today, and now I'd like to take any questions that you might have. All right, in the back, sir.
Were you always a cop?
He said, was I always a cop? Well, it kind of feels like it. My dad was a cop in the 1960s and 70s in New York State, so I grew up the son of a cop. Now, certainly that was before pensions and big salaries. I think the most he ever made was like $13,000 a year. Okay, another question, please.
When was the first time you were on TV?
He asked when was the first time that I was on TV. Well, let me tell you, it was kind of unusual, and it wasn't planned. I was 10 years old. My parents took me to Yankee Stadium. I was a huge Yankee fan. And so, like any doting mom, my mom bought me a banner that said Yankees. I think I still have it, a T-shirt. And it was a Saturday afternoon. If you remember back then, Saturday afternoon was a baseball game of the week, broadcast all over the country. Somebody came up into the stands and asked my mom, can we put him on television? They took me, they stood me on top of the Yankees dugout with my banner and my hat and my T-shirt and interviewed me on national television as the Yankee fan that was out there supporting their team. It was absolutely great. When I got back home a couple days later, all of my friends said, we were watching the baseball game. We can't believe you're the one that they picked out of the stadium and had on national television. That was at 10 years old. And from that time, let me tell you, I did a show at 15 and I absolutely loved it. I started doing some local work in my 20s in television, and it's just kind of grown from there. So I guess you can say I've kind of grown up on television, you might say. Okay, and another question from the young lady in the audience. Well, my first national television appearance doing the news really grew out of my work in Oak Cliff. I had written the newspaper article for almost a decade. I was actually hosting a radio show on CBS, and several people heard the radio show and gave me some local appearances on Fox. On their Good Day show, and that lasted for several years. But like I said, when you create opportunities, you never know where they're going to lead you. Some producers actually saw me on the local Dallas affiliate and called me and said they would like me to start doing national news as a law enforcement analyst. And I was very fortunate, even back then, nearly 20 years ago, to work with both CNN and Fox News, to work with a lot of their folks that were just getting started at the time. And over the years, as my expertise in law enforcement has kind of built and my media resume has built, I've been very fortunate to appear on national network shows, international shows, and serve as a law enforcement analyst still for CNN, for Fox News, for BBC, and for many of the other major networks out there. One final question. How about the gentleman in the back?
What is the Community Safety Institute?
He asked what the Community Safety Institute is. That is actually a private company that I own. We founded about 20 years ago to provide consulting services to law enforcement agencies, community groups, federal agencies. We have a huge staff of law enforcement practitioners and professionals like accountants, attorneys, psychologists around the country that we bring together on specific projects that we design for law enforcement. Everything from neighborhood watch and community policing to anti-terrorism programs to de-escalation training and online and distance learning. So the Community Safety Institute is kind of our repository of how we deliver our services in law enforcement out to the 17,000 plus agencies out there in the United States.